He didn't speak until he was almost 4 years old. His teachers called him hopeless. His own father feared he was a failure. Yet this same failure would one day rewrite the laws of the universe. But behind the genius was a man who lost a daughter, fled an entire nation, and helped build the most destructive weapon in human history. This is the real story of Albert Einstein, not the legend, the man. Germany, 1879. The country was young, proud, and obsessed with order. The newly unified German Empire prized discipline above all, in school, in the military, in life itself. Into this rigid world, Hermann and Pauline Einstein welcomed their first child. A small Jewish family in a country where being Jewish already meant being an outsider. This was an era of steam engines and telegraphs. The world was changing faster than anyone could explain. And yet, the deepest mysteries of light, time, and gravity remained completely unsolved. No one knew it yet, but the answers were about to come from the unlikeliest of places, a quiet, stubborn child who barely spoke. Albert grew up in Munich, where his father and uncle ran an electrical engineering company. The hum of machines and the spark of electricity were the soundtrack of his childhood. At age 5, sick in bed, his father gave him a small compass. The needle always pointed the same way, no matter how he turned it. Something invisible was moving it. He later called it one of the most revolutionary experiences of his life. That tiny needle planted a question that would take him decades to answer. What truly moves the universe? But before the genius, there was doubt. Serious doubt. Albert didn't speak a full sentence until he was nearly 4 years old. Doctors and family feared he might be intellectually disabled. Even his own grandmother once called him almost stupid after meeting him. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he repeated every sentence quietly to himself first. A quirky habit his family called Albert's whisper. In school, things only got harder. Albert hated the rigid, militaristic German education system. He questioned everything, challenged his teachers, and refused to simply memorize and obey. One teacher reportedly told him, "You will never amount to anything." He was even expelled from one school for his constant defiance. But while the classroom rejected him, his mind was already exploring ideas far beyond his age. At 12, he taught himself geometry from a single book and called it his sacred little geometry book. He devoured calculus before his classmates even learned algebra. At 16, he performed a thought experiment that would haunt him for the rest of his life. What would it look like to ride alongside a beam of light? This single daydream would, decades later, become the seed of the theory of relativity. That same year, disaster struck the family business, and they were forced to move to Italy. Albert stayed behind alone in Munich to finish school, a lonely, miserable arrangement that he soon abandoned. At 15, with no diploma and no clear plan, he simply left and followed his family to Italy. At 16, he attempted the entrance exam for AV Zurich, one of Europe's top technical schools, and failed. His math and physics scores were perfect, but he failed French, botany, and other subjects completely unrelated to his passion. He spent a year studying at a school in Aarau, Switzerland, the first place that actually let him think freely. It was there, finally free from rigid discipline, that the seeds planted by a compass and a daydream began to grow into something extraordinary. In 1900, Einstein graduated from ETH Zurich. He expected a bright future. Instead, he walked straight into disaster. His blunt personality had alienated his professors. Not one of them would write him a recommendation letter. Without references, no university, no lab, no company would hire him. For nearly 2 years, Albert Einstein, future Nobel laureate, was simply unemployed. He grew so desperate that he seriously considered abandoning physics entirely to sell life insurance instead. His own father, gravely ill, wrote desperate letters to friends, begging anyone to give his son a job. Hermann Einstein died in 1902, never knowing what his son would become. It is said this regret haunted Einstein for the rest of his life. But financial despair was not the only secret Einstein carried in these dark years. In 1902, Albert and his girlfriend, fellow physics student Mileva Merrick, had a daughter out of wedlock, a baby girl named Liesel. Fearing scandal and the destruction of his career, the child was sent away to live with relatives in Serbia. After 1903, all historical records of Liesel simply vanish. No one knows for certain what happened to her. Some believe she died of illness. Others believe she was quietly given up for adoption. The truth was buried with the people who knew it. It is a wound historians believe Einstein carried silently for the rest of his life, one he almost never spoke of. Then, in 1902, a turning point. His friend Marcel Grossman helped him secure a stable job, a patent clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it gave his mind room to wander. Between stamping patents, he secretly worked on the questions that had haunted him since he was 16. Then, in 1905, at just 26 years old, everything changed. In what historians now call his miracle year, Einstein published 4 papers that would reshape physics forever. The first explained the photoelectric effect, work that would later win him the Nobel Prize. The third introduced special relativity, shattering centuries-old assumptions about space and time. And the fourth gave the world its most famous equation, E equals mc squared. A patent clerk, working in his spare time, had just rewritten the laws of the universe. But fame did not heal what was breaking at home. As Einstein's scientific star rose, his marriage to Mileva collapsed under the weight of distance, ambition, and resentment. In an attempt to save the marriage for the sake of their children, Einstein drafted a shockingly cold set of conditions for Mileva to follow. She was to maintain his clothes, serve his meals, and keep his room tidy, but never expect affection, intimacy, or conversation from him. It is one of the coldest documents in the history of science, and a reminder that genius does not guarantee kindness. The marriage officially ended in divorce in 1919. And the pain in his family did not end there. His youngest son, Edward, was a brilliant, musically gifted young man. But as a young man, Edward was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. When Einstein fled to America in 1933, he was forced to leave Edward behind in a Swiss psychiatric institution. He would never see his son again before he died. Meanwhile, the world outside was collapsing into darkness. The Nazi rise to power made Germany a death trap for Jewish scientists. His books were burned, his property seized. The Nazi regime placed a bounty on his life. In 1933, Einstein renounced his German citizenship and fled to the United States, never to return. Fearing Nazi Germany might build an atomic bomb first, Einstein signed a letter urging President Roosevelt to act. That letter helped set the Manhattan Project in motion, though Einstein himself never worked on the bomb. When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Einstein was devastated. He called that letter the single greatest mistake of his life. From that day on, Einstein devoted the rest of his life to warning the world about nuclear weapons. He once warned, "I do not know how the Third World War will be fought, but I can tell you what they will use in the fourth rocks." In his final decades, Einstein found himself increasingly alone, not from family this time, but from science itself. He refused to accept quantum mechanics randomness, famously declaring, "God does not play dice with the universe." For over 30 years, he chased a single dream, a unified field theory to explain every force in the universe. The rest of the scientific world had moved on. Many considered his pursuit outdated, even futile. On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away in Princeton from a ruptured aortic aneurysm. On his desk, researchers found pages of unfinished equations, his life's greatest question, left forever open. Einstein's life teaches us something far more human than relativity itself. Being doubted does not mean being doomed. Failing an exam does not define your future. And even the greatest minds in history carried grief, regret, and unanswered questions until their final breath. He once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." That same boy who couldn't speak until he was 4 years old changed how humanity understands time, light, and the universe itself. Not despite his struggles, but because of them. That is the real legacy of Albert Einstein. If this story moved you, the next legend is waiting. Subscribe to Lives and Minds that changed the world for more untold stories of the people history remembers, but rarely understands. Leave a comment. Which historical figure should we explore next? And if you want to understand the man behind one of history's most destructive inventions next, watch this. Thank you for watching.